Hey, are you tired of the left and right politics? I hope you'll subscribe to my YouTube channel. Just click that subscribe button, ring the little bell, and prepare to free your mind from the traditional red versus blue. So, Netflix got me again. There I was enjoying my rewatch of the entirety of The Crown in the aftermath of Prince Philip's funeral. But you know that function on Netflix where it tells you what's hot in the country at that particular moment? And I kept seeing Sons of Sam. And of course, being of a certain age, I was in junior high school when that all went down, 1976 to 1977. I felt compelled to just at least go and watch the trailer. And after I watched the trailer, I was in for all 4 episodes. The director, Josh Zeman, is here to discuss and describe. The project, again, is called Sons of Sam. It's on Netflix, and it's a 4-part documentary. Josh, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
You look too young to me to have been alive and paying attention at that time. Where were you when all this went down?
So I was fairly young, but still around. I was in Staten Island, New York. And the thing about Staten Island is that basically all the teenagers who were of age during the Son of Sam moved to Staten Island. And so I had heard about the Son of Sam growing up. You know, this was the local boogeyman for all of my parents and people around a little bit older than me. And of course, being from New York, you know, you're just super fascinated by these stories. And who's not fascinated by New York in the 1970s? Come on.
Oh, no doubt. And to see some of the stock footage and the newsreel that you incorporated is such a throwback. And look, this went on for a while. I mean, this went on for nearly a year. You correct me if I'm wrong. There was a serial killer on the loose, tormenting mostly couples who were in parked cars. Tell me if I have the data right. So we start with that which is not in dispute. Am I correct that there were a total of 8 incidents? 14 people were shot in parked cars. They ranged from the Bronx to Brooklyn, meaning all over the city. And in the end, there were 6 who died.
Yes, that's correct. It was 13 months, you know, and all of the boroughs except for Staten Island and Manhattan, Queens, the Bronx, Brooklyn. And really, this was an incredible time in New York City. New York City in 1975 had been on the brink of bankruptcy. As a result, a ton of social services were cut. You had garbage strikes. Garbage was piling up. You had the Bronx was burning, over 12,000 arsons. You know, the skyline was on fire. You had bombings from banks. You had the blackout, which caused an incredible amount of damage. And while this is all going on, you have a serial killer, theoretically one, who is stalking the kids and shooting couples in lovers' lanes. And it was just an unbelievable time. No one was going out. Everybody was terrified. People weren't going to bars. They weren't going to restaurants. They weren't going to discos.
And the police and the communities are being tormented by these bizarro letters. Speak to that.
Yeah, there were 2 letters that was sent. The first one was left at the scene of the crime in the 6th shooting. That's where the guy says, "I am Son of Sam." And this letter is completely bizarre. It's scrawled in like your unbelievably typical serial killer letter. That letter, interestingly enough, doesn't get printed. The cops kind of keep it on the down low, and that's because the guy's saying that he's going to theoretically kill and rape the women of Queens. So, you know, they don't want panic to ensue. As a result, the Son of Sam sends a second letter, this time to New York Daily News columnist Jimmy Breslin. And Breslin, of course, prints the letter and then gives it to the police. And this one is very different from the first. It's well drawn, so much so that the police went to Marvel and DC Comics thinking that it was illustrated. And this one talks about, in much more kind of dramatic setting, welcome hello from the gutters of New York City. That's the opening line. I mean, it's
Right.
unbelievable.
Harrowing. Harrowing.
Totally.
It's like a horror movie. So
Well, that's the
if you
thing.
had asked me before I saw your film, before I saw the documentary, if you had said to me, Son of Sam, what do you remember? I would have said David Berkowitz. He was listening to the neighbor's dog. He shot up a bunch of couples on lovers lanes, and in the end, he got busted by a parking ticket. I mean, it
Hmm.
had a very neat and orderly, albeit bizarre because of the dog reference, ending. I mean, it was very tidy, and we all went on and resumed our lives, which I guess is why this project becomes so fascinating, because it now seems, I must say, I found what you did convincing, and I am very skeptical. I love docs, but I am very skeptical, cynical by nature. But I thought you made a pretty compelling case that he did not act alone.
Listen, I'll be honest with you, we barely scratched the surface. There's a podcast that I did that I said, Netflix, there is so much material I am not telling you. Like, I'm not giving you the nitty gritty details. I was like, we have to do this podcast. So we did, it's called Searching for the Sons of Sam. You can find it anywhere. And that's where we like go into Maury Terry's like incredible gritty detail of this, talking to people and after the fact, and it's just amazing. And to be honest, like, look, things were different in the 1970s in terms of how we looked at police investigations, procedures, the politics of it all, the fact that, Mayor Beam wanted this wrapped up. And now, when I'm like, hey, by the way, there's some real questions here, and there are some real questions, by the way. There is a preponderance of evidence to suggest that David Berkowitz did not act alone.
Josh, I buried the lead. Who was Maury Terry?
Good point. Maury Terry is an investigator that wrote a book called The Ultimate Evil. I have been doing a documentary in Staten Island called Cropsey about some missing kids from my hometown. And there was some weird idea that maybe these missing kids were somehow connected to a cult that was theoretically behind the Son of Sam case. And when somebody was telling me this, we heard these rumors, I thought, oh, this is complete satanic panic. But some cops kind of pulled me off to the side. They sat me down and they're like, no. There is some truth, at least to this Son of Sam case being connected to a cult. And they said, look, go read this guy's book, Maury Terry's book, The Ultimate Evil. So I pick up this book and it scared the hell out of me. And I don't scare easy. I'm a debunker of things that go bump in the night. I don't scare at all. And this book terrified me. And so I was like, I have to find out who this guy Maury Terry is. And he was a little bit of a crackpot. He had done this incredible investigation, and the police basically called him a crackpot, and he doubled down and went completely down this rabbit hole. But his initial investigation into the Son of Sam not acting alone was good, real good.
And he twice interviews David Berkowitz behind bars. We're both at Attica. I know the first was at Attica.
The first was at Attica. The second one was Sullivan Correctional.
Okay, and I'm trying not to give away the entirety of the 4-part documentary, but I'll go so far as to say that Berkowitz, I think, confirms much of what he had been reporting all those years.
It's very true. I mean, again, there is a preponderance of evidence to suggest that Berkowitz didn't act alone. I mean, look, let me just give you one little thing, right? It is one of the largest manhunts in New York City history. They spend tens of thousands of man hours investigating every little single detail. For example, someone mentions Wicker Street in one of the letters. They watch The Wicker Man to see if there is any connection. And when Berkowitz is caught and admits to everything very cleanly, and he's smiling for the cameras, it's very weird. It's very strange. And suddenly gives this fully outlandish, bonkers story that a dog commanded me to kill. Like, if I told you this story now, you would laugh me out of the courthouse. You would laugh me out of the courtroom, But he gives this story and they buy it hook, line, and sinker because he's got details. He knows, parts of the crime. He was there and admits to it. But the police don't interview Berkowitz's neighbors, the guys who live basically down the street, who happen to look like the sketches and who are also the real Sons of Sam, the Carr brothers, right? They don't spend 1 hour interviewing these dudes who are also the sons of Sam. How do you not do that in a post-arrest investigation?
Okay, so let me ask the skeptical question.
Sure.
If in fact there was this satanic cult, I guess based in where were they based? What was that park that you kept going back to?
That's Untermeyer Park in Yonkers. And
Yonkers.
I also think, like, the case is also about satanic panic in the 1980s and really identifying, like, what's a satanic cult? I mean, come on,
Okay, well, okay, so give me what you think then. Who were these people who were hanging out in Untermeyer Park in Yonkers? Were they just kids with a keg who, for shits and giggles, were talking about Satanism?
I mean, that's a good point, right? Are we talking about kids with a keg and spray painting 666? Or are we talking about maybe 3 levels more depraved than that? Maybe we're talking about a group of 7 to 10, 22 disciples who, were kind of evil dudes who, engaged in a lot of bad behavior, and who decided to call it a satanic cult because that's a much easier way and a good moral justification for a lot of bad behavior. Look, we know that evil dudes find each other and they like to hang out together and they love to find a moral justification for why they do what they do.
But my question is, if David Berkowitz was not acting alone and instead was part of a satanic cult that was responsible for these 8 different shootings, 14 people shot in these incidents, 6 of them dead, why, with the neat, bizarre ending, does the violence stop? Why aren't the cult members still out there killing people?
Well, these were murder. Some, according to Maury Terry, these were murder. Some of them were murder for hire plots. Other reasons. If you listen to the podcast, it goes actually into a further level that there was a real estate part of it too with the discos. Look, they wanted to enact some chaos. They wanted to mess it up, and they wanted to get down and depraved in New York City, and they did that. Maury Terry alleges that the murders technically didn't quite stop. They just changed their MO.
Paul Giamatti? How did that come to pass? Paul Giamatti is Maury Terry voicing this documentary.
I had worked with Paul, and he loves everything that's completely weird and bizarro, and he loves true crime. So I was like, Paul, do you want to do this? And he's like, oh, yes, this is going to be interesting.
Do you know how David Berkowitz, behind closed doors, first of all, has he seen your documentary? Do you have any idea as to what he thinks of it?
He hasn't seen it. I did correspond with him because I wanted to get his thoughts on Maury Terry. David Berkowitz is habitualized to prison and does not want to get out. And he does not want to rehash this part of his life that he is repentant about and embarrassed about.
He's found religion behind bars, Christianity, right?
Yes, yeah, and he's been heavily involved in the church for a good 20 years now.
And he bears a nasty ass scar on his neck. What's that all about?
Somebody slashed his throat. And
in prison.
50 stitches. And this was right around the time that all this information was coming out. That is a warning.
Final question for Josh Zeman. It's a Netflix 4-part documentary called Sons of Sam. Why you? In other words, Maury Terry, you meet him when his health is in decline. He's got voluminous information about what had been for him a decades-long project. Why does he give it all to you? Why does he entrust it to you?
That's a good question. He had seen the previous documentary I made called Cropsy, and I think he saw that I caught the bug. I think he saw that I, in some respects, was like him and was falling down the rabbit hole. And, I think he thought that I could help validify his work.
Well done, Josh. Appreciate you being here to discuss it. And as I say, you took me away from the crown. Not easy to do, but I don't regret it.
Awesome. Thank you very much.